Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is the box, and this is the item that controls all the bits. The focuser, the cameras, takes all the images from the telescope, and I'll show you exactly what I've been using up to now. Yeah, it's this big thing, and inside we have a Raspberry Pi. We have a USB hub. We have some fans, keep cooling down at my latitude. That's probably not necessarily necessary. And we have a kind of sort of like 500 gig disk, and we have a GPS receiver, just to provide an accurate time to the mount, and that's pretty much all it's used for. This is quite bulky. It's quite big. I made it myself, and it's great because you can put it underneath the tripod. There's a couple of kilos maybe, I don't know. But we're looking at replacing it. So what we're going to replace it with, and we'll make some improvements along the way. So yeah, it's DHL, but not everything came by DHL. So to give you an idea, every night when I image from home, I attach that and this to a power supply. That goes into this, and I have a lot of cable. A lot of cable. 5 meters, just take it away from the house. Got a little snag in the cable there, but so here I'm powering the Pi on a cigarette lighter type adapter that can provide 3 amps for 5 volts to the Pi. I have 5 other 12 volt connections, focuser, dew heater, CCD cooler, just mount obviously, and something else. I'll think about it in a minute. It's quite a lot of cable. It's just getting all over the place. I want to reduce that. So there's ways. So what we have in this box. So as you've seen in the box, the wooden box below, we have a SSD card, external SSD external drive. This drive, it's 512 megs, gigs. Yeah, we're talking gigs. So we have a WD Green 480 gig SSD drive. It's M2 form factor, which means that this is just a card, whereas the one in the wooden box is a proper external one. Interesting, yeah. It all becomes clear. I've got the Argon M2, Argon 1 M2 case for a Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi 4. It'll only fit the Raspberry Pi 4. I have a mounting case for something, which I'm going to show you in a minute. we have a Raspberry Pi 4 to go in the Argon 1, and we have Pegasus Astro PPBA Advance, which is slightly more. This is the sort of the added thing. So we're going to produce something extra than what we had before, and we'll take a look at it. It's a similar form factor to what we have with the Argon one. It's not too different. It's similar form factor to a Raspberry Pi, really. So on this side we have we've got a power connector there, which we'll talk about in a minute. We've got a USB 3 hub with 4 ports. The first of that hub's ports can provide a 3 amp power. So that's sufficient to power this device completely. So we don't need to use one of those power connectors, and that leaves us with 3 other USB 3 connections. Got an uplink port, which I imagine I'll use to uplink to a USB 3 port on the hub itself. Then on this side we have a extension port. It's what Pegasus Astro guys call it. That essentially will connect to a temperature and humidity sensor, which is going to calculate the dew point. And the reason the dew point is going to be calculated is because we have 2 dew heater connectors here on this side, as well as 4 12-volt output points. So we've got 12 volts in there, up to 8 amps, and then we can power all our equipment. So I guess the idea is that I'll open this in a second, these 2 coupled, I can attach that to the telescope with this, which is just a mounting kit. I can attach this to that, maybe with some Velcro, or we can find a better way of doing it. And all of a sudden, all those cable management issues kind of sort of go away, because everything's being powered from here. And not only that, but once I connect this via USB connection to the Pi, I can load some software onto the Pi, which will do a couple of things. Firstly, it'll allow me to control the dew control, and secondly, it'll also allow me to manage the power to these 4 outputs. So if I need to reboot a camera, I'll just take power away from the camera and restart a driver or something like that. I can actually do that in software. Yeah, seems pretty good. So why the M2, the Argon 1 M2? Well, this crossed, and I guess I ought to say, we'll do the software, the hardware side of things in this video, and then maybe at a later date I will return with another video which show the software configuration of all of this, because Yeah, I think that's a natural way of changing and separating this. So I'll just get rid of some of this. So put that in there for the minute. Right, so yeah, so giving this a good look at. Got some screws in there, that's good. So why the Argon M.2? So when put together, it's going to house a Raspberry Pi in there, and the first Raspberry Pi version 4, by the way, a Model 4B. So first things you notice is that everything, all the connectors, are on this side, and also what you might notice is that these two connectors are full-size HDMI, whereas if you look at a Raspberry Pi 4 computer, the connectors for HDMI are mini HDMI, they're small, which throws a few people out. When we set this up, we're actually not going to use HDMI at all. However, this is a form factor with a bit of Velcro, like that. That's going to work pretty well. This is what can I say? This is sort of aluminium alloy of some sort, and the other thing to note is that it repositions your entire GPIO on this side. So if you want to use a hat, and I imagine some of the for instance, Pi Juice hat or something like that. I imagine that would fit onto there. You might need an extra header, and they've labelled all the pinouts as well for you, so you know what the GPIO is. And this feels magnetic, so that's what's keeping it in place. Feels solid. That's pretty good. So we're just going to do the hardware setup here. So on the bottom side, oh right, so I mentioned it was M2. So the reason of getting an M2 is that allows you to attach an SSD. It has to be a SATA SSD. I think I need to yes, just arrived today. So let me just cut that there. By the way, so before you handle anything, statically discharge your body from anything. I tend to do that by just trying to find a piece of exposed metal in my PC case. But that's what you should do before you, or wear an anti-static wristband. Although, having said that, as long as you're careful with these things and you're not touching any of the contact directly, you should not really have to worry too much about it. So it's WD green. So the reason I went with the WD green is that it's on the market at the moment. It's supposed to be the lowest power consumption SSD that you can find. At rest, when it's doing nothing, it uses something like 30 milliwatts, and at idle, when it's just using some transfer, then it should be using about 80 milliwatts. And if it's at full transfer, for instance, if you're saving an image from your CCD straight onto this, which you might do, then yeah, almost 3 watts. But most of the time you're not going to be doing that. That only happens for a short period while you're after your capture is complete and happens. So this is the sort of the greenest or least power consumptive SSD on the market, certainly for something with a capacity of 480 gigabytes. Before I do that, I need to remove a screw. And I thought I had left. So I got a normal sort of Stanley precision screw set. Had for a number of years now, and we just need to remove that screw. We're just going to go back in place afterwards, and it will hold everything in place. So we'll just take that out. Take this out. So when I mention that you shouldn't touch any of the contacts, what I mean is these little gold things at the end. Just try not to touch them directly, and do try to earth yourself on something before, yeah, and try not to wear any woolen clothing or anything like that. That's going to attract static electricity. That's normal. That once it's in the slot, it tends to want to sit out at a 20-degree angle. Put the screw into the driver and just push that down. Align it. My eyesight's not that well, so I need to take this off while I do this. That looks pretty good. I can see the screw thread, so we just put that in. And that's the disk drive. Put the right glasses on. That's the disk drive attached to that part of the Argon M.2. So now we've got this part. So what we want to do is attach this part to the Argon M.2. So one thing that this does have is, as I mentioned, GPIO. So that is when you put this on, you want to align the pins of the 40-pin GPIO there, and then everything else ought to fall in place. This also has an IR infrared detector, so which I guess is programmable, and you can do certain things with it. When I come to doing the software part of this video, I will show you the software installation and what it allows. But it's a Raspberry Pi. It's incredibly programmable. Just need to make sure I line these pins up before I put it in. So just stick that down. Line 40 pins there are going in. That's good. And what you can see is that everything's now aligned on that outside thing. This is nicely in place. No, I haven't done it. I've done it wrong. Have to take this out again. Before you do that, so the Raspberry Pi has got a load of connectors on one side, and the Argon 1 essentially repositions and reformats those to something else. So I need to eke this out a little and put that on first. Silly me. Right, so Raspberry Pi has two USB 2 connectors there and two USB 3. It has an Ethernet connector there. Also has a phono output there. Two HDMI's, that one being the primary, and the power connector, which we won't actually connect to at all because we're going to power it off this case powers the Raspberry Pi off the GPIO. Yeah, so it doesn't need to connect that at all. However, we will be powering it via a USB 3 connector. Okay, so I've got that little addition in there, and now I just need to reposition as we were doing before. The GPIO. Just push that in. Make sure. And as you know, I'm trying to avoid touching any individual any individual contact with my skin. It's probably okay to touch it with your fingernail, but not so much with your skin. So when we put that on there, and you can see the extra USB 3 connector has arrived at the bottom. So I need to screw this in. I need to screw the let's have a look. Do I need to? I probably have some screws that I can put in there, but essentially that's what's going to happen. And we end up with this little mini computer. It's great. This is a quad-core 8GB memory with 480 gigabytes of hard disk space, with a fan, which you can also configure once installed to only turn on when it needs to, when the core temperature reaches a certain temperature, and quite probably if you're imaging the same part of the world as I am, you'll probably find that that fan's not going to turn on too often. So with that, and we Velcro or somehow attach these two guys together, we basically, this is going to completely replace that. And it kind of reminds me of a scene from a film, Brazil, where they had something like this, and so the plumber comes along and says, "No, but I can replace it with that," and it works just as well. Of course, this doesn't have the GPS functionality, but this is just another GPS 2 device, which we can implement. And also with that, I get to remove most of this. So essentially, before, one of those cables was being powered off the RPA, off a single one of those cables. That's going to be replaced by the first port here, which can supply 3 amps of 5-volt power to the Pi, to this. So that's that sorted. We've got before one of the power cables was supplying a variable via potentiometer power to one of these dew heaters. I can now also go and get another dew heater and dew strap for anything I need to. And so that leaves 3 cables, so I've got 3 potential 12 volt outputs that I can use, and these are also controllable in software. So so that's the assembly. I'm going to screw this up and put it together. Probably try and source some short cables for what I'm missing, but about probably 500 grams, maybe a bit more, and that will add to the payload on my telescope, because probably the best place to mount this is to put it on the telescope itself. I do have a mounting kit, and I'm hoping I can somehow get that mounted around there. So yeah, it does add to the payload of the telescope as it moves around, but the benefits are that there's far fewer cables that are moving around that are going to snag or get in your way during an imaging session. And if we get these like closely clamped together, it acts as far more compact situation to be living from than the big wooden box that I have, which wouldn't be suited to doing any remote imaging. So this little thing, what this essentially does is, as you notice, we connected that SSD drive, an M.2 form factor SSD drive, to the bottom case. In order to have it connect to the Raspberry Pi, what you need to do is essentially uplink it, and the method of doing that is by connecting this. It's just a USB pass-through that connects one of the USB 3 connectors to the M.2 drive, so that it's detected on boot. And I guess one other thing, which is kind of sort of getting onto the software side that I don't want to do too much in this video. When you get a Raspberry 4, the likelihood is at this stage, at the factory, it has not been loaded with firmware. These have upgradable firmware to boot from an SSD. They're likely to still have an older firmware, and just on this side, what you see is there's an SD card connector. I don't know if I have one to hand, but I'll probably do. Insert, no. Micro SD, I should say. Maybe this one has it. No. So you might have to have some way of programming a micro SD card in, and this is just an adapter that converts SD to micro SD. The pinouts are the same, it's just a much smaller form factor. It may be the case that you need to load an operating system via the SD card before being able to boot from an SSD. Just a caveat, I guess, just to work out where you're going to get and how you're going to get there. So form factor wise, I guess I'm gonna, form factor wise, I was gonna close off the recording, but I seem to somehow stop the recording. That's a form factor, and that's going to work great. It's probably about 500 grams, I think, less than a kilo, certainly. Somehow find a way of attaching these two together and make all the connectors work in tandem and work well with each other. Pegasus, PPB Advance, Pocket Power Box Advance, quite. Oh, there's one thing I guess I didn't show you. So the pocket power, well, pocket power box advance comes with a temperature sensor, which we can open. This looks so much bigger in the videos or the marketing. It's really a tiny little thing, and you plug that in there into the side. So this is an environmental sensor. All it's going to do is measure your temperature and relative humidity. And so out of the box, this you can plug it in, and basically what it'll do is it'll calculate a dew point. Is dew likely to occur on your sensor? And if it is, it will up the power on your dew heater. So just something straight out of the box, just a little standard sensor like that. Standard electronics that calculates that for you. It's nothing major, but it's a nice little extra. Anyway, as I said, form factor of our I need to get the screws in, really, don't I? Form factor of this is pretty small. Like I say, there is a adapters. I had it around here somewhere earlier. The PPB comes with some side screws that you can attach, and you can get the adapters for it, and you should be able to find some way of attaching that to your scope. Right, I'm going to properly rejig these two videos because obviously I somehow must have stopped recording halfway through, or right at the end of the last video. And post this online. I hope I hope you found it instrumental, and I will be doing another video which is going to go more into the software configuration of this device, the Raspberry Pi with Astroberry, and also adding on the necessary software additions. Well, I say necessary. It's really just the power management side, as to when the fan of the Pegasus power box actually comes into play, which will only affect you if you're imaging in particularly hot nights, or maybe doing solar things during the day. But yeah, for the UK. Any extra software that's required for this is purely for management purposes and being able to reboot it, and perhaps it might be looking after the watchdog in order to, if this stops responding, that it automatically reboots and so on. Whereas I'm guessing that there isn't going to be that much required for most installations. I would probably think that leaving the auto-dew setting is probably going to be ideal, but those things are configurable. Anyway, yeah, so to the next video, and that'll be looking at the software side of setting this device up. That was just the hardware overview of what we've got now. Great. Well, clear skies doesn't look like it from here, but yeah, clear skies hopefully where you are. Bye.